We're back, realtalktwincities.com. I'm your co-host, Eric Pirius with Bell Mortgage, and
I'm your host, Cheryl Kempenek with Coldwell Banker Burnett.
on AM 1280 The Patriot. We're going to get into rent versus own, what makes sense, which side of that equation do you want to be on, and also dispel the myth that loans are hard to get. You guys think, don't you feel that most people think loans are really tough these days, hard to get? Does that seem to be a recurring thought out there?
Yes.
Yeah, I hear that all the time, and one of the big mysteries is what is all of this information that they have to give you to get a loan, and who in the heck is this underwriter?
All right. Well, that's a good. Yes, there is an underwriter on every file. There's a loan officer and a processor, and that's about it as far as who sees your documentation. And along those lines, what you need to get a loan is a job, credit score over 640, and down payment, which can be 5%, as little as 5%, which also can be a gift. So it's really not. I mean, that's it. If you have a job, okay credit,
Okay,
and
but
5%
Eric,
down.
you forgot about VA. We actually have
Yeah.
two clients that we are
Right.
working with
Right.
jointly right now. One is actually closing tomorrow, both VA, and they are putting 0 down. I know my client wrote a check for earnest money when we submitted the purchase agreement, and he's actually getting a check back at closing.
That's right. So for any veterans, the VA loan program is well worth taking advantage of. It is 100% financing, so you can get, have 0 down in that case. So we take care of our veterans. I'm in the Homes for Heroes program. So any veteran out there, if you want information, just get in touch with us at realtalktwincities.com or give me a call at 612-275-2136. But if you're not a veteran, you do need that 5% down, although all or some of it can be a gift from a family member or a relative, an uncle, for example.
And the other thing too, I just want to keep you on track here, Eric. We're not talking about 3.5% down programs right now,
Right.
because that would be FHA.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about FHA in the future.
Yep.
And I just want to say too, that we do owe our vets so much. And all of us agents and Eric on the team at Real Talk Twin Cities, we are available to help you anytime, and we actually do have a discount program for you as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so with the 5% down, we do have mortgage insurance, the dreaded mortgage insurance that everybody talks about. However, there's some ways to get around it, if you will. Typically, you think of mortgage insurance as something you pay monthly. It's $120 a month. But you can also do an upfront mortgage insurance, which is a one-time lump sum fee that's paid at closing, and that's it. It's a one and done.
And I have a good idea.
What's that?
With mortgage insurance, everybody hates the thought of mortgage
Right,
insurance, and we
right.
know if you put 20% down, you don't have to deal with it at all.
That's
So
right.
if you're doing any type of a loan with less than 20%, we have the dreaded mortgage insurance. But Eric, could we ask the seller to pay for the mortgage insurance?
We can, and before I go there, the reason for mortgage insurance, and just so you understand, there is some benefit to the buyer. Mortgage insurance, you might think, well, if I quit paying my mortgage, it'll pay the mortgage for me. That's not it. Mortgage insurance insures the lender against loss. So if you put 20% down, they figure, well, there's enough equity there. If we have to sell, pay some attorney fees, pay the realtors in the event of foreclosure, we're going to come out okay. If you put 5% down, there isn't enough equity to even pay the realtors, never mind attorneys, or if the market drops a little bit. So the benefit to you as a buyer is that you can get a loan, you can get a house and stop renting with 5% down. So that's what mortgage insurance insures against. And yes, you may have heard of seller-paid closing costs, which is very typical. Ryan, what percentage of your transactions include seller-paid closing costs?
Almost all of them, actually.
Cheryl?
It really depends on the price point, but
Okay.
I would say if I'm working on the average market price of $250,000, it's close to 100%.
Okay.
I'd agree with that.
So it's very common. And in the case of with 5% down, you can get up to 3% in seller paid closing costs, which would be $7,500. The mortgage insurance, the upfront mortgage insurance, is 1.75 times the loan amount, which would be 4156. So in this case, which if we're talking about a purchase of 250,000, 4,000 of the 7,500 in seller paid closing costs goes towards that upfront MI piece, and that's it. You're done. It doesn't influence your monthly payment. It's paid at closing by the seller.
And if we ask for 3% in closing costs, there's still money left over to pay
Right.
for some of the other closing costs
Right.
beyond the mortgage insurance.
And Ryan's gesticulating madly. What, Ryan?
Can we do more than 3%?
You can, however, at the 5% down, the limit in seller paid closing costs is 3%. If you
Okay.
put 10% or more down, then you can go up to 6, which usually isn't necessary. Maybe 4% sometimes, but it's just overkill, I think.
Right. Sometimes we see people might want to ask for 6% in closing costs if they're thinking there might be a home improvement project and they want to reserve some of their cash instead of paying for their closing costs. They
Sure.
want to hang on to that, and then maybe they can get new flooring or new countertops or something like that.
Yeah, I hear you there. Let's flesh out our $250,000 purchase and really hit home, no pun intended, with what the difference is renting versus owning. So you can buy a home for $250,000, put 5% down, get the 3% in seller pays, do the upfront mortgage insurance, and your payment, and this is with typical taxes and insurance. This is all in. We're not leaving anything out. Your payment would be $1,493. So maybe you got a married couple of kids. Your rent is probably going to be about $1,500. Wouldn't you guys agree?
That's amazing. I know a lot of people that are paying more than $1,500 a month in rent, and they just don't realize that for that same monthly expenditure, they could own a $250,000 home, which is really a pretty nice home in some great areas.
So who's making the money if they pay the rent?
The landlord.
Right. So which side of the equation do we want to be on? We want to be on the ownership side, and these numbers are based on some accurate, relatively conservative assumptions. I assumed $500 for maintenance per year, inflation at 2%, 2.5% appreciation, and being in a 25% tax bracket. What I'm talking about is if you rent versus own in 5 years, where will you be? In other words, the difference in rent versus own at 5 years out. And the difference is you will be $36,834 richer in 5 years if you buy versus renting. And that's presuming you sell in 5 years. Now, of course, if you don't sell, that money's in your equities, not in your pocket. But this is if you rent right now or buy right now in 5 years, and then you sell, and that's including 6% to pay the realtors to sell your place, you're going to be worth about $37,000 more dollars. So that's
And that's really huge. And every one of you should be working on your own personal financial plan and not just thinking about how much money is coming in every month, how much money do I have to spend on rent. You really need to start taking that rental number, multiply it times 12, and start realizing what you're spending on, and you're not getting any tax benefits. If you take a look at some of these scenarios, you might be paying $15,000 a year in interest, which means you can save 25 to 35% of that money on your taxes.
Right. And that's also figured in, the fact that all the interest that you pay on your mortgage is a tax write-off. And I know, Cheryl, you mentioned that the folks renting and sometimes parents might buy a condo instead of paying for rent for their kids. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, Eric, you actually did a scenario on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a student who's going to be going to college for 4 years, and we see this primarily with medical students and law students, because they're at the U for 4 years and in a lot of cases longer, and you go through and you compare the rent that they're going to pay versus if you go in, you buy a condo and you turn around and you sell that in the 5th year, you will actually gain, what do we have here, Eric?
Well, for a $185,000 purchase price, with 20% down in this scenario, because that's what we decided most folks do, versus $1,200 a month in rent for $1,200 in a payment, including association dues. In 5 years, you'll be worth $30,115 more having purchased that condo rather than renting a place for $1,200. The net gain is a little over $30,000. So again, it's a no-brainer. And then maybe the student moves away, that becomes an investment property.
And
then,
bottom line too, what a lot of parents are doing is going into title with their student, so their student is building up credit as well.
that's right. And you have the satisfaction of ownership. You can have the pet you wanted. No restrictions, no rent spikes.
Okay, this is RealTalkTwinCities.com with Cheryl Kempenek.
And Eric Pirius. Next up, we're going to get into our local neighborhood Ask Expert. Jane, the principal of St. Helens, and our
St. Helena.
St. Helena. St. Helens, that's a volcano.
Oh,
AM 1280 The Patriot. RealTalkTwinCities.com.
nice.